Now we're live.
Now we're live. Yeah, we were just debating technology and confusion, generally speaking.
It's not really a debate. I was just expressing my confusion. That's what was happening.
I was trying to understand it. I wasn't very successful. So,
hello, good morning,
Hi.
afternoon.
Good afternoon. It's great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Some announcements. We'll start with announcements.
While we wait for people to show up.
I'm not going to start with that one then. Okay, tomorrow we're going to be in Brookings at Disrupt HR. Brookings Disrupt HR. We have some really amazing presentations, so you should definitely come by tomorrow evening to Club 71. Club 71
right.
inside the Dakota Conference Center.
Stadium.
It's at the football stadium.
The football stadium. There's drinks and stuff, so this is one of my favorite kinds of events. So you should come if you're in Brookings or in the area.
It's a really cool format. It's actually 20 slides in 5 minutes that are auto-forwarded. So you either are like a complete rock star and end exactly where you're supposed to, or else it's a complete disaster and it's terrible. So it's really kind of entertaining to watch.
Okay. I hadn't really thought about the whole potential disaster part.
There's a lot of potential disaster.
I
mean, will be amazing.
I revel in disaster.
That's right. That's right. It's your space.
It's
like your home territory. We're actually doing 2 separate presentations. Mine is about making change thrilling for your people, and Meg's is about team dynamics, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's so much fun. We'll have to show you. We'll have to actually do it for you sometime because it's really fun.
Yes, and look, we just magically posted it in the comments.
Of course we did. Thanks, Shelly.
It's Shelly over there.
So yeah, and Meg will be available on Friday in Brookings for meetings.
I will be, yes.
I am committed most of the day, but
I will not be available at lunchtime, but I think I will be available the rest of the day.
At least for now. I'm sure you'll get more follow-on meetings after Thursday.
Yeah. Okay, then we are graduating 3 IXAF folks from cohort 3. So we just had a webinar with them earlier today, and they're going to be doing their capstone project so that they can graduate, and that's cool.
We have someone starting next week. She's doing an accelerated program, so we're kind of focusing on that. So that's fun. And then we have kind of 2 new starts in the next week or so. So
yeah,
so exciting.
And then cohort 5 actually starts in September. So look out for the links to the webinar, share them around to whomever. Certainly sign up to listen to the webinar talking about the certification program. The webinar is completely free. And that will be sometime probably mid-August. The actual webinar itself, and then we'll start cohort 5 in September.
Yep.
PM classes in September.
Week of September 19th, I think. And so there's a 2-day project management boot camp, and there's a 3-day guiding organizational change. And so, or you can take the whole 5 days. It's pretty awesome. And if you want a certificate from Black Hills State University, you can take both classes together, and then is that for me? No,
sorry.
That's okay. They're both classes. You take both classes from me live. There's 10 short courses online, and then there's an online course that you participate in. And you can actually, for one package deal, $4,500, you can actually get a certificate in advanced project management from Black Hills State University. You're just taking it. That's the class I'm teaching. So you can either join the class through the university and get your certificate, or you can come through just public through Rose Group, and then you can take one or both classes as you see fit. So that's the options.
So to get the certificate, do you have to take a test?
No. The BHSU certificate is just taking the 3 classes and then the 10 online classes. And that just basically checks all the boxes of the things that you should know before you get the certificate. If you want to get a project management professional certification from like the global world of project management, then you have to take a test. So that's a different thing. This is just hey, I've done all of this training on project management, so I know a lot about project management.
Okay, gotcha.
Yep.
Last announcement before we get started for the day, book reviews, please. I saw these books that just look really boring, not boring to me because I think HR stuff is cool, but really boring HR books, and they have so many reviews. So
I don't know why it's so hard.
I don't know why
and
it's
we get
so hard.
many people telling us how great our book is, but getting reviews is pulling teeth.
Yeah, so on Amazon, there's this really cool section for every product they sell, and it's called review. And if you get on there and type in IX Leadership, you'll find our book, and then you can find that section that says review, and you can give us a review, and that would be
amazing.
Incredible. I was going to say some bad words, but I decided.
Look at you. Besides, Shelly would scold you. The other thing that that I posted, Shelly, I did the video, Shelly posted it, is that we're trying to hit 400 members of this group. And so Shelly's going to give away a free audiobook to anyone who wants to get the most people that invite other people that sign up. And the cool part about that is that free audiobook is you don't have to use yourself. Let's say you already have the book, maybe you have the audiobook. You can gift that to anyone you want. So you can forward that email to anybody, maybe your congressperson or your
CEO,
your partner's CEO, your brother's boss, whoever you want, because they could all use it. You just don't know. So invite your friends. We'd love to see them here. Of course, we'd welcome them. All right. Got any other notes here? She's got some notes here. I don't know if they're for now or for later.
No, they're not for now.
They're just reminders for later.
We're good.
Okay. So the quote Shelly used on Monday was a dreamy quote that I ran across on LinkedIn. I can't remember who the quote is by, but it's essentially, we're interested in building less toxic minds, not more resilient canaries. And this was so I really felt like this is the only thing that matters today, because it is the core thing that we worry about. So, so that got us kind of down this rabbit hole of, there's a ton of resilience training going on, a lot of resilience books. I have a very good friend who wrote a resilience book that's very insightful and powerful. So I'm not dismissing that whole work as a body, but there's a lot of resilience training talking about making resilient cultures, resilient teams, and that sort of thing. But to me, it almost feels like we need to make resilient teams because our leaders don't know how to lead us through change or chaos. And so if we give them a pass on leading, then we have to be more resilient to prepare for change and chaos. And so I think that's a really interesting idea that I'm going to have to think a lot more about. But that's basically what we're going to talk about today is toxic cultures. I think the key thing that I keep coming back to is that no one ever gives a directive or a challenge to leadership that says, to a leader that says, you are responsible for having a functional organization or for not allowing your organization to be toxic. It is your duty. It is on you. No one's accountable, to use one of our favorite words. No one in most organizations is accountable for the toxicity levels of the organization. There's not specifically anywhere. And I think that's an interesting part of the challenge probably, is it isn't in anyone's job description. No one gets promoted. No one gets a big bonus. If your performance, if your revenue is huge, you get a bonus no matter how toxic your work environment is. And I think that's really interesting. I think that's a really interesting idea.
Yeah, I think toxicity, while it maybe because it doesn't live in anybody's job description, it belongs in the hands of the leadership. And I think the reason that it's allowed or just maybe a blind eye is turned to it most often is because it limits our ability to, in fact, be toxic ourselves. So if you want to live in the victim loop and say, well, it's not my fault that this, or you can blame other people or blame extenuating circumstances and external factors outside of your realm of influence, it's a lot easier to say, well, golly, it's not my fault, or it's not your fault, or it's not our fault.
It's not my responsibility.
Yeah, so that's what causes toxic environments, is when people like to not be accountable. So I think that really allowing a toxic work environment is the handiwork of leaders who, I'll just go right ahead and say it, don't want to be held accountable necessarily. They might not know that it's true. They might think, they assume that everyone wants to be held accountable and that they show that they want to be held accountable. But I think the reality we always find, that has been proven to us time over time in the clients we work with, is like, well, but if we tell so-and-so that they can't do blah, blah thing, then we can't really make exceptions for me or you or Susie Q over here. And people don't like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the bad behavior that's allowed that creates a toxic environment is really what we address a lot. So culture types is so interesting. It's really about our work environment, but what it really helps us do is identify behaviors and the root cause of the behaviors, and because that's the thing that drives us crazy, right? I've used the example all the time. If you have two people that are late every day, one might be a stabilizer and they might just have something super stressful going on at work and they have a hard time getting to work because they're so stressed out. And the other person might be an independent who doesn't like rules and they want to show up when they're comfortable showing up. And so a lot of times we address symptoms, right? And so if you're going to go talk to these two individuals about being late every day, if you know one's an independent and one's a stabilizer, maybe you have the same conversation, but understanding the underlying root cause is going to change the way that you think about those people being late. And maybe you will change your approach. Maybe not. Maybe it's, you need to be here. You're in a call center. You need to be on the phone at 8 o'clock every morning. Too bad. Hopefully an independent doesn't have that job, because that'd be horrifying for them. But
It would be.
It'd be horrifying. Awful. But that's what, as an example. And so it's this, the toxicity is not just this like big building walking around that's making everyone mad. It is the behaviors that are allowed in those organizations that make it a toxic place to work. And how do you address those? And that's what sort of we do.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times it is pinned on one person. It starts out that way. So it's like, oh, well, man, we just really don't know what to do with Julie over there. She's always cranky and she's driving people nuts. Chances are that person is one of many who are kind of lending to this toxic work environment. And maybe they're just a person where, if they're order tolerant, there's a lot of change in the organization and there hasn't been, and the change has not been managed well by the leadership team, that person's going to be pretty miserable. And so one of the kind of the first lessons we teach people in dealing with each other is Mad Hatter principle. And that's that no one is, if you start out by assuming no one is nefarious on purpose or being mean or bad or unkind on purpose, then really your objective is not to trash talk them. Your objective is to find out why they're doing what they're doing so you can help them fix it, so you can all move forward with the business. So I think that, Mad Hatter principle, especially for leaders, is a great place to start because it makes you, it helps you think about other people's perspective, and it requires you to be very self-reflective. Because if you can't really just focus all your energy on why that person's being so miserable or that they are being miserable and you can't understand why, then you have a lot more energy to spend on reflecting on, what you're doing or not doing to create that environment. So Mad Hatter principle is a pretty important thing, a good place to start if you're trying to figure out why there's a toxic work environment. And trying to pin it on one person is usually, a futile effort to figure out what's going on.
Feels a little blame gamey.
A little blamey.
Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, one of the examples of some clients that we're working with, they had a big turnover at their executive level, CEO level. And so everyone kind of got shuffled around, and a new chairman came in. Sorry, I'm just going to check my phone. Our kids are at the pool, so I just need to check my phone. Make sure there's no disasters, no bleeding. But they have a CEO turnover, and so they have a new chairman of the board, and it's this kind of crazy time. And so what's going on in the background is they've got an executive who wants to eventually change the company structure, and so doesn't really want to do anything like too severe, because she knows that in 2 years she's going to change everything anyway. And so, but that makes her feel really wishy-washy. Like she makes a decision, then she checks in with everybody to make sure it's okay with them, because she knows that she wants to eventually roll out. So that makes everyone feel really uncomfortable and not like there's no vision. And so, and it feels like, and then they're not really wanting to commit to anything because they know that the chick in charge is not really committing to anything. And so everyone's a little uncertain. And this creates these weird behaviors that no one really understands, and it feels very toxic. And so that's a really interesting challenge that I don't know if we've seen specifically about, like, it's really the lack of vision that is at the source of all of this discomfort. Even for fixers and independents who are much more chaos tolerant, if you don't know which way to go or how to make decisions on a day-to-day basis, then you tend to focus on the wrong things, maybe, or you focus on the down chain instead of the up chain and all that. So it's a really so the first thing we do is culture check everybody and say, okay, well, how is everyone reacting to this? And what is going on with the vision? And because that's how you get through these big transitions, is to anchor in that vision. So the lack of a firm vision is what's allowing this sort of toxicity to build and develop. So it's an interesting case study for that company.
Yeah, and I would say, anytime somebody asks me, well, what do you think people really want at work? And I think I just actually talked about this in the last live. Do they want an opportunity to drink tap beer on their break and ride a bicycle around or sit on a beanbag or whatever? No, they want accountability. They want clarity. They want, precise information. They want boundaries, parameters. Of course, we all think that's not true. We all think, no, we don't want that. I want to live a unique individual life. Even if you're order tolerant, people think that's what they want. Well, yeah, that's what you want. But you can buy the kind of bike you want outside of work, or drink the kind of beer you want. At work, if you really want people to focus on safety and having a great working environment that leads to increased productivity, give them parameters, give them a vision, tell them what is going on. So many leaders are, we hear this all the time. Oh man, Shelley is such a great leader. Just love her to death. I mean, I'd follow her into the depths of hell. But I don't really know if we're going to hell or if we're going for lunch most days. So then I'm like, what are your expectations for leadership? Well, I'd really like to have a better idea of where the company's going. So being wishy-washy, but being, like servant leader, I support everyone, doesn't actually help anything. Don't do that. We should shake our heads at the same time more often. It looks funny.
Or different speeds.
You have to go fast. I'll get dizzy.
Yeah, we don't want any sickness, motion sickness problems.
Live vomit.
Not on my stuff.
Oh, not anyway. On your desk. Well, there's a couple of extra questions.
We should hit the questions quick so we don't go too long. We're trying to keep these to a half hour because we all know everyone's busy. Okay, well, that was added. Did anyone vote for that one?
Which one?
This bottom one.
Somebody did.
What are symptoms of a toxic work culture?
Yeah. Whoops.
Okay.
I think we kind of.
We covered that. I think that you know it as well as I. Somebody asked me the title of the book. Is high five. Part of the title is high five cultures, and someone asked me, well, what's a high five culture? I'm like, what do you think it is? Like, well, a place where you want to go high five everybody. Yep, that's right. So a toxic work environment is a place where you don't want to be. There's shitty behavior that's allowed. No one is riding herd over. Listen, these are the values that we share, and this is the vision we want to achieve, and we're not getting there this way. So
Silos, no transparent communication, lots of behind the doors conversations.
Misery.
Yeah.
Yep.
High turnover, as we well know.
Mm-hmm.
What types of strategies?
It's never about the money.
Yeah. What types of strategies does one make to resolve a conflict in a toxic work environment? What types of strategies do you employ to make to resolve conflict?
The first one I would say is talk about it. Because when you don't talk about it, guess what? How many things in our lives have ever gone away by wishing? None.
Maybe a zit on my face when I was in high school.
Yeah, but you got another one. But you know what I mean? Like, there are never people problems that just go away, ever. And so you got to talk about them. You got to address them. You have to ask. If you are in a position of authority, you need to address them. If you're not in a position of authority, you need to either resolve it with the other person or elevate it as needed, I guess.
Yeah. And I think if you're not in a place of authority and you try to elevate something following the chain of command and it's not working, you can skip the chain of command if you need to. Or, we talk a lot about start it within your own department, or start with the group of people that complain with you about how miserable it is. There's probably a group of people. If you're really on an island all by yourself, go get a different job. But because you're probably just miserable because you're really not in the right role, or maybe not sharing the vision of the company. But There's got to be a group of people around you where everybody's kind of seeing it from the same perspective. And so get with that group of people. If you can't affect change up in the organization, affect it out. So
now that does not give a pass to leaders, because I hate it when people say, well, everyone's a leader and it's all a responsibility of everyone. Yes, that's true. But if you are an executive or a top level leader, the buck stops on your desk. Like, yes, you can't steal you can't have staff stealing, but at the end of the day, the revenue is up to you. So if you are an executive position or a leadership role and you don't really know how to tackle this, call us, because we do and we can fix it.
I guess there's lots of different ways, and we could go on for hours, which we won't. But one thing I would say is just to stop. So from the leadership level, to make Rachel's point even more clear, from the leadership level, somebody says, or that group of people say together, whether that's an email that goes out to everyone or a couple all hands meetings, we're not going to have any more gossiping, backbiting, blah, blah, blah. We know we've been guilty of it ourselves. We're not going to do it anymore. It's all about, really, toxic work environments are all about, or getting rid of them, all about ownership. If you own it, then you're indirectly holding other people accountable for their actions. Then they either have to, if you create an environment where they don't belong, they're either up or out. So I would say start immediately with it. It doesn't have to be a policy. It doesn't have to be a protocol. It can just be a statement that says, we're not going to do any more of this talking behind people's backs and, backbiting or whatever, gossiping. That's not serving us. So I would say that's a strategy that, we've helped some of our clients implement it and had immediate, like within 12 hours, results.
Yeah, the next day. This is a really interesting idea, because I had this conversation with another IXAF practitioner this week, and she told me, well, those feel like changing those things feel aspirational. And I said, no, they're not. They're a commitment you make to your people. Those are decisions you make every day. They're not things like, well, I want to make $1 million this year and we're making $10,000 a year. That's aspirational. The behaviors that you choose to bring every single day are decided by you every day. So if you don't want to talk about other people behind their back, don't. If you make that expectation with everyone and they all agree, then don't. It's a decision you make. It is not aspirational. It's not, I hope it changes. It is a decision you make on how you behave every day. So just decide. Don't be part of the problem, at least. All right. Well, so sorry, soapbox.
Leaders, it's your fault if you're not deciding. Okay.
I already said that.
How can I know? I heard. How can culture types help cure a toxic work culture? Well, I would say baseline, because if you really understand where somebody comes from, you don't have to see the world the same way they do or agree to see the world the same way they do, but it gives you a scope so that you can understand where they're coming from and why certain things are important to them that are not important to you, or maybe not in the order of importance to you. So it kind of actually helps you build a little bit of an accountability framework for yourself, because if you're checking those boxes of well, if Rachel's order tolerant and I'm chaos tolerant, and I say, okay, well, Rachel's going to want information, and I know that because of our culture type differences, it changes that conversation with myself from Rachel's a real big pain in the butt because she's always asking lots of questions to Rachel needs information, and out of respect for that desire, I'm going to make sure that I think of 2 questions, or if I'm the one answering the questions, I answer her questions, maybe even before she thinks of them. So I think that I think that's the biggest way that culture types helps with a toxic environment.
I think too, one other aspect of culture types is that under stressful circumstances, we all retreat to our corners, right? So we can be really generous and offer everyone a lot of grace and try to really be supportive when everything's going well. When it's stressful and everyone's walking on eggshells, we actually, I think, become more extreme in our work environments, in our culture types. So as a fixer, I can be super tolerant to a stabilizer because they need different things than me. But when I'm stressed out, I have my patience goes to nothing. And so it's really hard to start resolving that toxicity without that awareness, because if you don't have that awareness, like I'm aware of it and it's hard. If you don't have that awareness, it's almost impossible to bridge those gaps. So
yeah. How does a toxic work culture affect your bottom line? Well, let's see.
Is that one of ours?
How much money?
Shelley, that's a great question.
How much money do you think you spend on turnover because people don't like the culture in your organization? A lot.
How much? What is the number on average? You always throw this number out. What is it? Like per person?
Oh, well, like how much recruitment costs are?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
40%. Although when I was doing that webinar last week, I think Ben had some numbers that are even higher, but we'll say 40%. It costs you 40% of a person's salary to recruit a new person. And that doesn't include all the overtime that you have to pay, or even if they're salaried employees, you still, the next person then is super stressed out. It's the waterfall effect of bad juju that happens in an organization that we don't account for in terms of dollars, right? So we HR people are always trying to say, well, but look, Sue quit because the environment is garbage, and now John's doing Sue's work and John's work, and now John's stressed out and he's stressing out this person, and then that person quit. And so it's that kind of stuff that happens in an organization that it's really kind of hard to capture how much that's costing you. But we've seen numbers upwards of $1 million in 1 year. 1 year.
1 year in one organization.
In an organization of less than
1,000 people.
1,000 people.
Yeah, less than 1,000 people.
So, and that, my friends, does not even include the amount of money that you're spending or you're losing because your productivity is down. And it doesn't account for, if you're in an environment where safety is important, it doesn't account for the amount of money you might lose through your work comp policy or and the injury and mental health, just because people are stressed and then they're not focused on their job and then they have an accident. So, let us count the ways.
Yeah. And actually it's important to do that, because a lot of times people think, well, just go to work, get the job done you're supposed to do, and it doesn't matter. But when you start literally listing all of these things out and adding them up, it's a massive amount. And you can start quantifying things like client retention or customer service, feedback, on-time delivery, if you're in a project-based organization. All of those things are negatively affected by a toxic work environment, which is huge. It's huge. I'm sure it's caused companies to go out of business. No doubt about it.
Well,
no doubt about it.
Yeah. And even if the cost of that itself doesn't cause you to go out of business, you will certainly, I guarantee you, at some point have some sort of a employment law issue, discrimination claim or something, and that person will certainly own your business.
Yep.
So, yeah. How much time does it take in a toxic work culture before people start resigning?
I love this question, Terry, because I know what it means to you. It depends. So that's a great question. So that has everything to do with how each culture type goes through change. So every culture type has a different tolerance for change, and especially change that is not well managed. So if, let's say, we have a huge turnover or a huge change, a buyout, a sale, a new CEO that changes everything. If there's no goal, if there's no new vision, if there's no new, we're going to do all of this crazy stuff and no one really knows what the deadline is or when it's going to be finished, that stresses people out the most. And that's something that a lot of chaos people, I was read all these articles on LinkedIn, and they're like, well, you just got to be more flexible, man. You just got to wait and see what happens and roll with it. I'm like, that's great for chaos. That's a great message for chaos people, disaster for order people. And even some chaos people have a hard time with totally open-ended, nothing vision. And so the stabilizers may stay longer because the leaving the crazy organization feels even more stressful than staying through that toxicity and finding a way to cope with the toxicity. Chaos people won't be as intimidated to leave, I would say. I don't know if intimidated is the right word, but they'll be more willing to leave because they're more up for change generally, and so they won't put up with it. So I would say 9 months seems like kind of a magic number. Like, we were talking with a big insurance firm that just doubled its size, and they said if they could keep someone for 9 months, they're going to stay. And so there seems to be like that 6 to 9 month window where people say, well, I'll give it 6 months and see how it goes. And the government, when they hire you, you get a 90-day probationary period, and then you get to decide to fire them, or else they're an employee for life, basically. And so that's only 3 months, but it seems like that 6 months to 9 months period is when the people who will leave quickly will leave. And then the stabilizers can take up to 2 years to really decide that they can't deal with the change, or that it's not for them. It takes, or to think about leaving is okay. That's like almost a 2-year process. So it really varies hugely for the different culture types. What do you think about that? Does that seem about right?
Yeah, I think that seems pretty much spot on. I think, if you have a big change that happens, or something that's creating a toxic work environment, some people will leave immediately. Like, I've been in a situation where we had people that left, like the big change was announced. It wasn't, I don't know if it was well managed. But people, there were a couple people, as soon as they found out about it, they quit immediately. So you're going to have those people who might do that in the face of change, or a change in the toxicity of the work environment. It's really when you start to see some patterns in it, or like, oh, gee, we lost another, oh, okay, there's another one went out the door. And I do think 9 months is an appropriate amount of time to kind of be monitoring that. Because sometimes, when change happens and there's a perception of toxicity within an organization, it might just be, or it could be a major component is that there are people who don't want the change. Mm-hmm. They like things the way it's always been. And if the change isn't really managed well, and they don't really understand the value of how the change is helping them or helping the organization, or maybe they just don't care. But I don't want it, I'm out. That's kind of a different environment. So I think giving it 9 months gives you a pretty good idea of like what's actually happening.
And as a leader, that shit is really, sorry, Shelly, that stuff is really terrible when stabilizers start leaving, because that tells you that they have been so miserable for so long. They have decided that changing jobs, which feels very stressful to them, is less stressful than staying in your work environment. And that is a huge sign for you that you need to change something. Because I think a lot of we've seen it. A lot of executive teams aren't feeling the same amount of anxiety or stress as their people below them. And so they just figure, oh, and when you have an exit interview, people say, oh, well, I'm having a baby. And so I'm just going to be a stay-at-home mom. Or, oh, it's time for me to retire. And then guess what? They have a job in 2 weeks. Or, oh, my husband's moving. And so we're all moving as a family. Well, guess what? They would never have left if their work wasn't so miserable. So you cannot say, well, everyone has a legitimate reason for leaving. It's not about us. It's they have something else going on. And I'm like, that happens sometimes. Not as much as it is probably happening in your organization. So you have to be really, really tuned into, well, not really tuned in. You have to be paying attention to who's leaving and how fast, because people that prefer order have to be really pretty miserable for a really long time before they leave. And that's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anything else?
I don't think so.
All right.
That's all of it.
Any
Book
final
reviews,
questions?
Book reviews. Maybe we need to make a song about it.
Sure. Let me get my tambourine and I have a guitar. We can strum a little tune.
Yeah.
I think I can only play like A chords, but we can make it work.
We're a little monotone.
Yeah, that's right.
We'll
sing around the A chord.
Yeah.
It'll work out great. All right. Well, thanks so much for being here. It's great to see everybody. And let's see, we have Mitch, Kristen, Danielle, Melissa, and Ty. And we've had a couple other people hop in and out. So thank you so much for taking the time. We know you're very busy and we love seeing you. So thank you for being here.
Yeah. What she said. Lead powerfully.
Change the world. See you soon.
Bye.